Hi there. Today we're drifting back through time under the soft glow of paper lanterns to feudal Japan. Picture it, the gentle rustle of bamboo leaves in the wind, the distant silhouette of a castle against a lavender sky, and you a noble samurai, polishing a sword whose steel seems to hold the light of the moon itself. It's a powerful romantic image, a warrior poet steeped in honor and mystique. But the truth is, the silk kimono and the cherry blossoms are just lovely window dressing on a life that was often short, brutal, and frankly, a bit of a raw deal. For every moment of stoic glory, there were 1,000 moments of discomfort, dread, and deprivation. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And for a bit of fun, post your location and what time it is where you are. It's always a quiet thrill to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story doesn't begin on a battlefield or in a tense standoff with a rival clan. It begins much earlier in the chilly, sparse room of your childhood home. You're barely 6 years old. The floor is made of dark, polished wood, cool against your small feet. There are no toys scattered about, no colorful drawings tacked to the paper walls. There is only a pervasive, heavy silence, the kind that teaches you to make yourself smaller, to take up less space. Your father sits before you. He isn't the man who will toss you in the air or tell you stories. He is your first master, your first lord, and his face is a mask of stern appraisal. Today's lesson is not in reading or writing, though those will come with their own particular cruelties. Today's lesson is in stillness, in control. He tells you a story, not a fairy tale, but a parable. A young samurai boy, not much older than you, was attending a ceremony. A stray coal from an incense burner landed on his sleeve, and his fine silk kimono began to smolder. The boy did not flinch, did not cry out, did not even brush the coal away. He sat perfectly still as the fabric burned through to his skin, because making a scene would have disrupted the harmony of the occasion. Your father's eyes bore into you. The message is not subtle. This boy is your role model. This is the first and most important rule you will ever learn. Your feelings are a liability. Fear is a poison. Pain is an illusion. Joy is a distraction. They are weaknesses that an enemy can exploit. But more importantly, they are indulgences that dishonor your family name. When you stumble and scrape your knee during your lessons in the courtyard, you are not comforted. You are scolded for your carelessness and for the undignified grimace that flashes across your face. You learn to swallow the lump in your throat, to press the tears back into their ducts until your head throbs. Crying, you are taught, is for farmers' children. Your tears are not your own. They belong to your Lord, to be shed only at his death. Your academic education is just as rigorous. You spend hours tracing calligraphy, your small hand cramping around the brush. A single misplaced stroke, and the entire page is ruined, earning you a sharp rap on the knuckles and the command to begin again. You memorize dense Confucian texts, their philosophies of loyalty and filial piety drilled into you, until they replace any personal code you might have developed. This isn't about enlightenment. It's about indoctrination. It's about building a mind that is sharp, disciplined, and above all obedient. It's the world's most demanding and frankly unpaid internship. Then comes the bakken, the heavy wooden practice sword. It feels impossibly cumbersome in your hands, a clumsy club of oak. Your father doesn't teach you fancy techniques. He teaches you a single basic downward cut, and you practice it. Again and again and again. 100 times. 1,000 times. Your shoulders scream. Your palms blister and break and bleed. You smear them with a foul-smelling herbal paste and keep going. This is not the art of the sword. It is the drudgery of the sword. It is muscle memory beaten into you until the motion is as thoughtless as breathing. To cultivate your spirit, or rather to break it, your training takes a turn for the bizarre. This is where we find a mainstream historical fact. Your martial training begins in earnest around age 5 to 7, long before you have the physical or emotional maturity to process it. But alongside the sword drills are the hardening exercises. A quirky tidbit from the annals of samurai lore involves sending children like you out on lonely, terrifying errands. You might be told to walk to a graveyard in the dead of night and leave a token on a specific headstone to prove you went. Or to an execution ground, a place thick with the stench of death and the wails of the condemned. The goal is to master your fear, to become so familiar with the morbid and the terrifying that it no longer affects you. Sometimes in the dead of winter, you're made to stand barefoot in the snow for hours, or go without food for days. It's all in the name of gammon endurance patience, the quiet bearing of the unbearable. Beats a trust fall, I guess. Now it's important to note that historians still argue whether these extreme, hardening tales were universal practice or more of a romanticized ideal, perhaps only common among the most elite or Spartan families. For every boy sent to a haunted forest, there were likely a dozen more whose training was simply a monotonous, grueling routine of chores and drills. But the underlying principle was the same: your comfort, your safety, your very sense of self. They were all secondary to the forging of a perfect warrior, an unthinking instrument of your Lord's will. You become a prodigy of observation, not of nature, but of your superiors. You learn to read the subtle shift in your father's posture, the slight tightening around your instructor's eyes. You learn to anticipate needs to obey commands before they are fully spoken. But in learning to read everyone else, you've forgotten how to read yourself. What do you want? The question is meaningless. What do you feel? You feel the weight of your duty. That is all. The celebrated Zen state of mushin, or no mind, becomes less a meditative achievement and more a state of perpetual hollow readiness. The only creative writing you're encouraged to practice is your death poem, a skill you'll want to have handy for later. By the time you reach your early teens, the boy you were is gone. He has been systematically dismantled and rebuilt. You no longer cry. You can execute 1,000 cuts with the bakken without a single conscious thought. Your hands are calloused, your gaze is steady, and your heart is a quiet, empty room. You think you have mastered the pain, but you have no idea. The armor isn't even on yet. And so the armor isn't even on yet. But the day comes, as it must, when you trade the simple cotton of your training kimono for the rigid shell of your profession. This is no simple act of getting dressed. It is a ritual, a transformation. You are assisted because you must be. No single person can easily don this carapace alone. It begins with the underlayers, the shitage, and special trousers thicker than your normal clothes, designed to provide a thin, often inadequate buffer against what is to come. Already, you feel warmer than you should be. Then the pieces of the puzzle are brought forth. First, the sun-eat curved plates of iron bound with leather that are tied tightly around your shins. Then the hay date an armored apron of silk and metal scales that covers your thighs and knees, feeling less like protection and more like a weighted blanket you can't throw off. Next, come the coat, the armored sleeves, a complex assembly of chainmail and iron plates sewn onto a fabric base. As they are tied on, you feel your arms lose a degree of their freedom, the joints now bound by something other than your own sinews. You make a fist, and the metal plates over your knuckles grind together. The main event is the cuirass, the do, which protects your torso. Two main pieces, one for the back and one for the front, are hinged together. An attendant lowers it over your head, and its weight, a good 20 or 30 pounds, on its own, settles onto your shoulders. You feel your posture change your spine, compressing slightly under the load. A breath that was easy a moment ago now requires effort, pushing against the unyielding cage around your ribs. Finally, the shoulder guards, the broad and boxy sewed, are attached. The entire suit, a full gusoku, can weigh anywhere from 40 to 60 pounds, and unlike a modern hiking pack designed for ergonomic comfort, this weight is distributed with all the thoughtful engineering of a falling anvil. Now you are encased, and the sensory assault begins. Every slight movement you make is accompanied by a symphony of clicks, creaks, and rustles as hundreds of lacquered plates scrape against each other and the silk cords that bind them whisper their friction. You are a walking percussion instrument, and stealth is a forgotten dream. There's a smell, too, a unique and potent cocktail of old leather horsehair, the sharp tang of lacquer, and the faint sour ghost of sweat from the last time it was worn. It is the signature perfume of your caste. This brings us to a central historical fact about your gear. It is a masterpiece of complex construction. Unlike the solid plate of a European knight, your armor is made of hundreds, sometimes thousands of small iron or hardened leather scales, called kozane. These were painstakingly lacquered to protect them from the rain and humidity, then laced together in overlapping rows with brightly colored silk or leather cords. This design gave you superior flexibility, which was essential for archery and the fluid movements of Japanese swordsmanship. But that flexibility came at a cost. Those very same silk cords, while beautiful, were a critical vulnerability. A blade slicing through them could cause a whole section of your armor to fall apart. And in Japan's damp climate, they were prone to rot and mildew, if not meticulously cared for. The last piece is the kabuto, your helmet. As it's lowered onto your head, the world narrows. The bowl of the helmet is heavy, and attached to it is the shikoro, a series of curved plates that protects your neck but severely limits your ability to turn your head. Your hearing is now muffled, the world outside sounding distant and muted. Then comes the mempo, the face mask. It might be a risi with a snarling mouth and a bristling mustache of animal hair, or a smooth, impassive ryubu face. It's meant to terrify your opponent, but its primary effect on you is claustrophobia. Your hot breath immediately begins to mist the inside of the cold iron. Your vision, already constrained by the helmet's brow, is now channeled through the narrow eye slits of the mask. It's like trying to navigate a crisis while peeking through a mail slot. And for what? For flair, you get to add the my date, the helmet crest. This is a truly quirky tidbit of samurai life. These crests could be magnificent, gilded horns, fierce dragons, or elegant sunbursts. They made you identifiable in the chaos of battle, a living banner for your clan. But while they looked imposing, they were often made of lightweight wood bamboo, or even papier-mâché. You are literally heading into a life or death struggle with a piece of high-end craft project strapped to your forehead. You try to move. You feel clumsy and cumbered. If you were to fall in the mud of a battlefield, getting up would be a slow, draining ordeal, turning you into an easy target. You have the grace of a flipped-over beetle and all the anxiety that comes with it. In the oppressive humidity of a Japanese summer, the armor becomes a personal steam bath, and heat stroke becomes as deadly an enemy as any Ashigaru's spear. And of course, the chafing has begun. At your neck and your armpits, behind your knees, every point of contact is a potential site of raw, weeping skin. You don't complain, of course. You've been trained not to. But your body is screaming. It's worth remembering, as military historians debate how much a samurai's personal wealth dictated the quality and protectiveness of his armor, that not all suits were created equal. Your lord the daimyo might have armor that is a national treasure, perfectly fitted and crafted by a master. You, a mid-level retainer, might be issued a generic suit from the castle armory, ill-fitting, heavy, and possibly bearing the scratches and dents from its previous owner, who may not have returned it personally. Your life depends on this hand-me-down equipment. It's a comforting thought. You stand there a prisoner in your own uniform. You are a symbol of power and martial prowess, but you feel like a fragile piece of cargo being shipped into danger. The lacquered plates gleam, the silk cords are vibrant, and you look every bit the warrior from the woodblock prince. But you are hot, you are heavy, you are half blind, and you can barely hear. The battle hasn't started, but you're already exhausted from fighting your own gear. And you haven't even drawn your sword yet, an iconic weapon that carries a whole new set of burdens. And you haven't even drawn your sword yet, an iconic weapon that carries a whole new set of burdens. When you finally do, sliding the blade from its lacquered scabbard, it doesn't make the loud, sheeing sound you hear in movies. It's a much quieter, more intimate whisper of steel against wood, a sound that promises deadly potential. The blade itself is a work of art, with a wavy temper-line Hammond like a mountain range against a misty sky, and a mirror polish that seems to absorb the light. This is the famed katana, the soul of the samurai. And it is without a doubt your biggest headache. Your first lesson about the sword is that it is not a magical, indestructible object. It is not the lightsaber of feudal Japan. It is in essence an incredibly sharp piece of folded high-carbon steel, which means it's exceptionally hard, but also brittle. The pop culture image of a samurai slicing through a castle wall or another sword is pure fantasy. If you strike another blade edge-on or hit a piece of armor at the wrong angle, your priceless ancestral sword can chip, bend, or even snap. Each swing in battle is a gamble, not just with your life, a small matter, but with the integrity of your family's honor manifest in steel. Because of this fragility, the maintenance is relentless. This leads us to a quirky and rather fussy tidbit of your life, the elaborate ritual of sword cleaning. After any use, or even just periodically, to prevent the humid air from working its evil, you must tend to your blade. You place a sheet of soft rice paper on the floor and carefully remove the single bamboo peg makugi holding the hilt in place. The blade comes free. With a fresh piece of rice paper, you wipe away any old oil and dust. Then you take out your uchiko ball, a small silk pom-pom filled with the microscopic powder of a sharpening stone. You gently tap it along the length of the blade, leaving a fine gray dust. Then with another clean piece of paper, you meticulously wipe the powder off a precise one-way motion, from the base to the tip. This cleans and polishes the steel. Finally, you apply a fresh light coat of choji oil to ward off rust. One careless fingerprint left on the blade can etch itself into the steel as a permanent blemish. It's less stoic warrior and more anxious curator of a very sharp, very needy museum piece. This intense focus on the sword obscures a central historical fact of your existence. The katana was rarely your primary weapon on the battlefield. For much of samurai history, your main tool was the yumi, the distinctively long, asymmetrical Japanese bow. Learning to shoot one accurately, especially from the back of a galloping horse, was a life's work. Later, during the bloody unification wars of the Sengoku period, the battlefield was dominated by the yari, the spear. A disciplined unit of spearmen forming a bristling wall of points was infinitely more effective at repelling a charge or breaking a formation than a group of individual swordsmen. Your legendary sword was in reality a sidearm, a badge of your rank, and a weapon of last resort, for when the fighting devolved into a chaotic personal scrum. You are, of course, expected to master them all. The bow, the spear, and the sword are the classic trinity of your martial education. But then, in the mid-16th century, tall, strange-looking traders from the south arrive, and they bring with them the Tanegashima, the matchlock arquebus. It's a clumsy, ugly weapon. It's loud, it belches noxious, sulfurous smoke. It's maddeningly slow to reload, and many of the more traditionalist samurai in your clan view it as a coward's tool. But it can be used by a common foot soldier with minimal training, and it punches through traditional armor with terrifying ease, so you have to learn to use it too. Your list of required skills just keeps growing. Your warrior resume is getting quite impressive, but sadly, the benefits package still doesn't include things like job security or a pension plan. Even in the realm of swordsmanship, the reality is far messier than the legend. Swordsmanship experts and historians still debate the true battlefield effectiveness of the legendary single-cut techniques popularized in cinema. The idea of two masters facing off in a duel that ends with a single perfect slash is a powerful piece of mythology, but it's unlikely to have been the norm. A real fight with swords between two armored opponents was probably a frantic, ugly, and exhausting struggle. You wouldn't be trying to slice through your enemy's helmet. You'd be using your sword to hook his leg to find the gaps in his armor at the armpit or the groin. You'd grapple kick and try to wrestle him to the ground so you could use your short dagger, the tanto, to finish the job through his visor. It was less of an elegant dance and more of a desperate metal-clad brawl. All of this, the fragility, the maintenance, the secondary role, is compounded by the immense psychological weight of the weapon. To call the katana the soul of the samurai isn't just poetry, it's a statement of fact. This object is the physical embodiment of your honor. To lose it in battle is a disgrace that will haunt your family for generations. To have it taken from you is unthinkable. To draw it without sufficient cause is a grave offense that could lead to a direct order to commit ritual suicide. It's like carrying your entire reputation, your social security number, and a loaded weapon all in one, inconveniently long, slightly curved package. So you stand there encumbered by your ill-fitting armor, and now you're holding a weapon that is as much a burden as a defense. It's a delicate, high-strung tool that demands more care and attention than a prize-winning bonsai tree, and it's not even the most practical weapon at your disposal. This whole warrior business is proving to be a lot more administration than you expected. And to power yourself through this ordeal, of awkward armor and demanding weaponry, you need fuel. But the hardy warrior's diet you might be imagining is unfortunately still a distant fantasy. But the hardy warrior's diet you might be imagining is unfortunately still a distant fantasy. After a day spent straining under the weight of your armor, practicing endless cuts with your high-maintenance sword, and performing the grueling physical tasks demanded of you, a profound, bone-deep hunger sets in. You dream of a feast: grilled fish, savory chicken, mountains of rice, and bowls filled with vibrant fresh vegetables. You return to your quarters, stomach aching with emptiness, and kneel before the simple wooden tray that holds your dinner. And the fantasy evaporates. On the tray sits a bowl of rice. Next to it, a bowl of thin, cloudy soup. Next to that, a tiny, almost comically small dish containing 2 or 3 slices of a pickled vegetable. This is it. This is the fuel for a warrior. It's less a banquet and more a statement on the virtues of austerity. You pick up your chopsticks. There's no point in delaying. The main feature of every meal, the sun, around which your meager culinary solar system revolves, is rice. And here we come to a central historical fact for much of your life as a samurai. This would be genmei, or brown rice. From a modern perspective, this is a good thing. It's far more nutritious than the polished white rice hakumai that would later become a status symbol. Brown rice retains its bran and germ, providing essential fiber oils and vitamins. But nutritionally superior or not, it is still just a bland, starchy mass that you consume day in and day out for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It fills your belly, but it never truly satisfies. To make the endless mountain of rice palatable, you have 2 tools. The first is your miso soup. It's a simple, salty broth made from fermented soybean paste. If it's a good day, it might contain a few slivers of wakame seaweed or a single lonely cube of tofu. It's warm, it's savory, and its main job is to provide enough moisture and flavor to help you choke down another mouthful of rice. Your second tool is the small dish of tsukemono, or pickles. And this is a quirky and often shocking part of your dining experience. These aren't the gently brined pickles you might imagine. You might get a slice of takuan, a daikon radish pickled in rice bran until it is bright yellow and ferociously pungent. Or you might get the true test of a stoic palate, the umeboshi. This is a small wrinkled plum, pickled in salt, until it becomes a tiny crimson weapon of flavor. The moment it touches your tongue, an explosion of pure, unadulterated sourness and saltiness detonates in your mouth. Your eyes water. Your jaw clenches. It is an act of culinary violence. But that intense jolt is enough to reset your taste buds and allow you to face the next bland clump of rice. This isn't a balanced meal. It's a desperate negotiation between starch and salt. What's missing from this picture is, well, almost everything else. Where is the protein to rebuild the muscles you tore down during training? Where are the vitamins from fresh fruit and vegetables? Due to a combination of Buddhist prohibitions and simple economics, meat from 4-legged animals is a rarity for most of your life. You might partake in a wild boar hunt, but such an event is a feast and exception, not the rule. Fish is more common, but can be expensive unless you are stationed in a coastal province. Fresh vegetables are seasonal, and much of what is grown is immediately preserved in salt or brine for the leaner months. Your diet is a beige and brown affair, a testament to preservation and necessity rather than nutrition or pleasure. This brings us to the grim consequences. Nutritionists and historians continue to debate the full impact of this diet, particularly whether the samurai's famous stoicism was a cultural virtue or a physiological side effect of chronic malnutrition. A diet so heavily reliant on carbohydrates and so lacking in protein and essential vitamins is a terrible way to fuel a high-performance athlete, which is what you are. The problem became especially dire during the long peace of the Edo period, when high-ranking samurai eager to distinguish themselves from the lower classes began to exclusively eat expensive polished white rice. They didn't know that in polishing away the brown husk, they were stripping the grain of thiamine, vitamin B1. This led to a rampant and deadly disease called beriberi, known in Japan as the Edo ailment. You could be a master swordsman, a respected retainer, and find yourself struck down by lethargy, nerve damage, heart failure, and paralysis. You could survive countless battles only to be felled by your fashionable choice in rice. The irony is as thin and bitter as your daily soup. On a military campaign, your rations are even bleaker. You march with a bag of dried rice that you rehydrate into a joyless porridge and a chunk of hardened miso paste to scrape into hot water. It's calories, it's survival, nothing more. You might see your daimyo and his top commanders enjoying a much better spread, a clear and constant reminder of the unbridgeable gulf between his life and yours. The only trickle-down economics in your world is the risk of being splashed by his discarded fish bones. So you finish your meal. You are no longer hungry, but you are not nourished. Your body, this finely honed weapon of war, is running on the cheapest, lowest grade fuel imaginable. Every wound will heal a little slower. Every muscle will ache a little longer. And your mind will be clouded by a constant low-level fatigue. This pervasive sense of physical malaise, this internal suck, is as much a part of your reality as your sword and armor. And the obsession with control and appearance doesn't stop with your diet. It extends to every part of your personal presentation, including the very hair on your head, which presents a whole new world of daily discomfort. And the obsession with control and appearance doesn't stop with your diet. It extends to every part of your personal presentation, including the very hair on your head, which presents a whole new world of daily discomfort. Long before you face the rigors of training or the blandness of your breakfast, you must face your own grooming. The iconic look of the samurai, the top knot, is not a simple hairstyle. It is a time-consuming, uncomfortable, and mandatory piece of personal architecture. It all begins with the shave. You kneel perfectly still as an attendant, or a professional barber takes a small, wickedly sharp razor to your scalp. There is no comforting foam or soothing gel. There is only the cold steel scraping across your skin, a sensation you must endure without wincing. The goal is to create the sakiaki, a perfectly smooth-shaved clearing on the top of your head, stretching from your forehead all the way back to the crown. Nix cuts and razor burn are simply part of the process. It's the most painful form of male pattern baldness imaginable, and you are required to maintain it. There is, of course, a reason for this, which brings us to a mainstream historical fact about your life. The sakayaki was not originally a fashion statement. It was a practical solution to a painful problem: the helmet. Your kabuto is heavy hot and sits on your head for hours on end during marches and battles. A full head of hair underneath it would quickly become a hot, sweaty, unbearably itchy mess, a major distraction in a situation where distractions can be fatal. By shaving the pate, you reduce the heat and friction, making the helmet slightly more tolerable. It is a solution born of pure misery you inflict this smaller daily discomfort upon yourself in the hopes of mitigating a much larger one on the battlefield. Once your scalp is raw and gleaming, attention turns to the remaining hair on the sides and back of your head, which you have grown long for this very purpose. This hair is now painstakingly combed out and prepared for styling. And that requires a special substance, a quirky and unpleasant tidbit of your daily routine, the pomade. It's a hard wax called bintsuke abura, made from things like rapeseed oil and the wax of the sumac tree. To make it usable, it has to be warmed slightly, and then it is smeared liberally through your hair. It's incredibly sticky, with a texture like cold bacon grease, and it might be scented with cloves or camphor, a heavy cloying fragrance that will follow you all day. This greasy, stiffened hair is then gathered with intense precision, tied tightly with a paper cord, and folded forward into a neat little queue that lies flat against your freshly shaved pate. The result is the famous Shanmage top knot. The style is held in place by a combination of the sticky wax and pure tension. It pulls at your remaining hair follicles, constantly a low-grade nagging headache that becomes a simple fact of your existence. To preserve this elaborate construction overnight, you don't sleep on a soft pillow. You sleep on a takamakura, a small raised wooden or ceramic block designed to support your neck while keeping your precious greasy hairdo from touching anything. It is about as conducive to a good night's sleep as resting your head on a brick. Of course, the look was not always so standardized. Social historians still debate the precise origins and symbolic meaning of the shaved pate. While the practical helmet theory is the most widely accepted, it's possible that for some, in some eras, it carried other meanings, a visual signifier of your warrior status that was distinct from the hairstyles of courtiers, monks, or commoners, a meaning that evolved long before it became a battlefield necessity. This dedication to a difficult hairstyle exists within a much broader world of challenging hygiene. You live in an era before modern plumbing and sanitation. While Japanese culture has a long history of valuing cleanliness and bathing, the reality for a working warrior is often grim. You might enjoy a hot bath in a communal bathhouse when you are at your home castle, but on campaign, you can go weeks caked in layers of dust mud and the sweat that has been slowly turning sour inside your armor. Soap is a luxury. For most, a vigorous scrub with a rough cloth and hot water is the best you can hope for. Your clothes are no better. That silk kimono and those cotton undergarments aren't just thrown in a machine. They are washed by hand, a laborious process. You likely own only a few sets of clothing, meaning you are re-wearing garments far more often than you'd like. And what of your dental health? You might use a fusioji, a twig, frayed at one end to act as a brush, perhaps with a bit of salt for abrasion. But things like tooth decay, gum disease, and abscesses are common and untreatable afflictions. Chronic bad breath is simply a given. That fearsome mempo mask you wear probably does double duty as a social distancing device. Imagine the cumulative sensory profile, the smell of the stale scented pomade in your hair, the ever-present aroma of pickled vegetables on your breath, and the faint but persistent sourness of old sweat trapped in the fibers of your clothes. The romantic image of the pristine warrior simply doesn't hold up to olfactory scrutiny. Your entire appearance, from your armor down to your follicles, is a uniform, rigidly controlled. But maintaining it is a state of perpetual low-level suffering. This relentless focus on external form over internal comfort is the perfect metaphor for the code you are expected to live. by a philosophy we call bushido, which you will soon find is far more of a trap than a noble path. This relentless focus on external form over internal comfort is the perfect metaphor for the code you are expected to live by a philosophy we call bushido, which you will soon find is far more of a trap than a noble path. That word, bushido, hangs in the air around you thick with unspoken threats. It's meant to be your guide, your moral compass, the source of your heroic spirit. In reality, it is the source of your deepest anxieties. It's a game where the rules are never fully explained, but the penalty for breaking them is absolute. You might think you know the tenets: courage, integrity, honor, loyalty. These are the virtues romanticized in poems and plays. But this brings us to a crucial historical fact: the neatly codified version of bushido. The one with 7 virtues you can list on your fingers was largely a product of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was crystallized in a book written in English, long after you and your kind were gone, partly as a way to explain the exotic Japanese soul to a curious West. In your time, especially during the chaotic centuries of war, there is no single sacred text of bushido. There is no manual. Instead, you live by an unwritten, uncodified, and dangerously fluid set of expectations. It's what your father beat into you, what your lord demands of you, and what your rivals scrutinize you for. It is the way of the warrior, but the way changes with the political winds. An act of pragmatic battlefield cunning under one lord might be condemned as cowardly treachery under another. The clever alliance you broker today could be the reason for your execution tomorrow if your master decides to change his foreign policy. It's like trying to adhere to the terms of service for a website that changes its user agreement every single morning without sending you a notification. The absolute unshakable pillar of this code is loyalty. Not a noble loyalty to a principle like justice or peace, but a deeply personal feudal loyalty to one man, your daimyo. His will is your will. His enemies are your enemies. His whims are your sacred duties. If he points to a monastery of peaceful monks and tells you it is a threat to his power, you will burn it to the ground. If he decides your closest friend has become a political liability and orders you to eliminate him, you will draw your sword without question. Your conscience, that little voice of personal morality you might have started with as a child, has been systematically starved and silenced. It is a dangerous liability in a world that demands unquestioning obedience. This vagueness is not a flaw in the system. It is the system's most effective feature. It is a weapon used by your superiors. Did you fail to take an enemy castle? It wasn't because you were outnumbered and undersupplied. It was because your spirit was weak, a failing of courage. Did you voice a polite concern about a suicidal battle plan? You weren't being strategic. You were being disrespectful and insubordinate. The code is not a shield for your honor. It is a cage, and the bars can be moved and reshaped at any time to ensure you are always somehow in the wrong. This leads to some truly grim expressions of devotion. Consider as a quirky and frankly terrifying tidbit the practice of kanshi remonstrance by suicide. Imagine your lord is incompetent. He's drinking too much, listening to flatterers, and making decisions that are leading your entire clan toward ruin. You cannot confront him directly. That would be a fatal insult. So the most loyal, most sincere way to offer your feedback is to commit ritual suicide on his doorstep. The hope is that your gruesome self-inflicted death will be such a profound shock that it will force him to reconsider his path. It is the ultimate and most tragically ineffective entry in the company suggestion box. This is because your honor, the concept at the very heart of the code, is not about your internal sense of right and wrong. It is about your public reputation, your face. It's entirely external. If a peasant bumps into you and fails to show adequate deference, the insult is not to you personally, but to your lord's authority which you represent. You are a symbol, and your job is to keep that symbol polished and untarnished, a constant nerve-wracking performance. Given all this, historians fiercely debate whether bushido was ever a genuine guiding ethic for the majority of samurai. Was it a deeply felt spiritual path that warriors in their imperfect human way strove to follow? Or was it more cynically a brilliant piece of social engineering, a form of ideological control promoted by the ruling class to ensure that their soldiers would fight fiercely, die willingly, and never ever question an order? For most warriors like you, the lived reality was likely a messy compromise between the two. You are trapped in a web of impossible contradictions. You are trained to be a ruthless killer on the battlefield, but also to be a man of refined taste who can compose delicate poetry about the falling of cherry blossoms. You are taught to be frugal and spurn material wealth, yet you must maintain an appearance of prosperity and power befitting your station. You are told honesty is a core virtue, but you must be a master of espionage and deception if your lord commands it. Trying to live by this code is like trying to be a devout monk and a ruthless gangster at the very same time. It's a recipe for psychological ruin. This unwritten, ever-shifting, and contradictory code is the engine of your misery. It's a tightrope walk over a canyon of shame, and the rope has been greased with paranoia. And there is one singular, terrifying ceremony where all of this abstract pressure, all this talk of honor and loyalty, becomes brutally and horribly real the moment you are called upon to perform seppuku. And there is one singular, terrifying ceremony where all of this abstract pressure, all this talk of honor and loyalty, becomes brutally and horribly real the moment you are called upon to perform seppuku. The word itself, meaning cutting the belly, is clinical, almost elegant. The reality is anything but. Whether it's a direct order from your lord as punishment, or the only honorable path left to you, after a crushing defeat, the outcome is the same. It is the final bloody performance of your life, and the audience is expecting perfection. The scene is prepared with solemn precision. You are in a quiet room, at a temple, or a designated courtyard in a mansion. Fresh white cloths are laid over the tatami mats to honor the gravity of the occasion, and more pragmatically, to absorb the blood. Witnesses, officials from your clan, perhaps a representative of the Lord who condemned you, kneel silently at a respectful distance, their faces impassive masks. The air is thick with a sterile, focused dread. You first perform a final ritual bath. Then you are dressed not in your colorful silks or durable armor, but in a simple white kimono, the traditional color of death in Japan. You kneel in the formal seiza position, your legs folded neatly beneath you, a posture of supreme composure that you've held for thousands of hours in training. Before you, resting on a small lacquered tray, is the instrument. It is a tanto, a short dagger, its blade polished to a mirror shine. And here lies a quirky practical tidbit about this grim affair. The hilt and part of the blade are often wrapped tightly in white paper or silk, leaving only the last few inches of the lethal tip exposed. This is not for aesthetics. It's to ensure that you can maintain a firm grip when your hands become slick with sweat and blood, and to prevent you from accidentally slicing your own fingers as you apply the horrific pressure needed. When the moment comes, you might be offered a final ceremonial cup of sake. You may be expected to compose a death poem, a final, perfect 17-syllable summary of your life's fleeting nature. Then drawing on every ounce of the emotional suppression that was beaten into you. As a child, you loosen the top of your white kimono, exposing your abdomen. You pick up the dagger. The cut is not a simple, merciful plunge. The prescribed method is to slice deep into your own stomach from left to right. The agony is instantaneous and overwhelming. If you possess a truly inhuman reserve of willpower, you follow the horizontal cut with a second upward slice. This is not designed to be a quick death. It is designed to be an unambiguous and excruciatingly painful demonstration of your control over your own fear and flesh. But you will not be left to bleed out. Standing behind you in the one act of mercy this ritual allows is your kishakunin. And this is a key historical fact of the process. Seppuku was a privilege of the samurai class, a way to die with honor, unlike a common criminal who would simply be beheaded. The kaishakunin, or second, is usually a trusted comrade or a swordsman of renowned skill. He stands with his own katana raised. As soon as you make your cut, his job is to bring his sword down and decapitate you, sparing you the final agonizing minutes. But even this is a task of immense pressure. A perfect cut, known as dakikubi, severs the neck, but leaves a small flap of skin intact at the throat, so that your head slumps forward as if in a bow, instead of rolling gruesomely across the floor. A botched cut would bring shame to him, and to the entire ceremony. It's a very stressful, bring your friend to work day. The reasons for this ghastly end are many. You might do it to avoid capture by an enemy to atone for a great failure, or as kanshi, the ultimate act of protest against a foolish lord. Most terrifyingly, it can simply be a form of capital punishment. But historians and sociologists debate whether seppuku was primarily a way for a warrior to preserve his honor, or a state-sanctioned tool for political control. Was it your last act of free will, or was it the ultimate demand of a system that owned you body and soul, forcing you to participate in your own execution to validate the authority that condemned you? The psychological weight is immense. This is not a choice. It is an obligation. To falter to show fear or to refuse would bring a stain of cowardice upon your family that would never wash away. Your wife, your children, your parents, all would be ostracized. Their lives would be ruined. And so your family's very survival depends on your ability to calmly, gracefully, and without hesitation disembowel yourself. It really puts a new spin on the idea of a performance review. In the later, more peaceful Edo period, the ritual often became purely symbolic. For a high-ranking samurai sentenced to death, the dagger on the tray might be replaced by a wooden fan. You would simply reach for the fan, and that gesture would be the signal for the kaishakunin to strike. It's the feudal Japanese equivalent of clicking the "I have read and agree" to the terms and conditions box. This, then, is the ultimate expression of your code. Your life is a conditional loan from your Lord, and it can be recalled at any time. The calm ceremonial nature of your own destruction is the final test of the discipline that has governed your entire existence. But as controlled and personal as this form of violence is, it is a world away from the chaotic, filthy, and impersonal horror that awaits you when you are finally unleashed upon a real battlefield. But as controlled and personal as this form of violence is, it is a world away from the chaotic, filthy, and impersonal horror that awaits you when you are finally unleashed upon a real battlefield. The romantic paintings and epic poems depict clean, heroic clashes, a grand ballet of flashing steel and noble sacrifice. The reality you experience is a nauseating, terrifying, and profoundly stupid affair. It is a human meat grinder, and you are the prime cut. It begins with the waiting. Kneeling in your rank, you feel the sun beating down on your iron helmet. Your armor, already a burden, is quickly becoming a personal oven. You can hear your own heart thudding against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat beneath the surface of your forced composure. The air is tense silent, but for the rustle of thousands of men and the fluttering of clan banners in the wind. Then a single conch shell horn bellows from a distant command post, and the world explodes into noise. It's not the crisp clang of sword on sword. It is a deafening, discordant roar. The pounding of giant taiko drums a gut-thumping rhythm designed to intimidate the enemy and drive you forward. The bellowing of conch shells from your own commanders trying to signal orders over the din. The toki no koe, the synchronized war cry of thousands of men, a wave of sound that washes over you. And then the new sound, the one that terrifies you most, the sharp tearing crackle of hundreds of Tanegashima matchlock guns firing in a volley. The sound is physical. It hits you in the chest. And woven through it all is the screaming. Men shouting incomprehensible orders, men yelling in primal fear, and the high-pitched piercing shrieks of those who have just been shot, speared, or cut. Your vision is a tunnel. The narrow slits of your Mempo face mask are all you have. Within moments, the field is choked with a thick, acrid smoke from the arquebuses. It stings your eyes, it rasps in your throat, and it reduces visibility to a few precious feet. You can't see the grand strategy your lord planned. You can't see the flanks. You can only see the back of the man in front of you, the muddy, churned-up ground at your feet, and the terrifying, indistinct shapes of the enemy surging out of the gray haze. And here is the most sobering historical fact of your situation. This is not a battle of samurai against samurai. You are vastly outnumbered by the ashigaru, the common foot soldiers. They are conscripted peasants armed with long pikes or cheap matchlocks, forming the bulk of the army. You are more likely to be killed by a stray bullet fired by a terrified farmer's son you never saw, or to be impaled on one of the dozens of spear points in a defensive wall than you are to engage in an honorable duel with your opposite number. All those years of perfecting your swordsmanship and your life could be ended by a clumsy anonymous poke from a 10-foot spear. The ground beneath you is a nightmare. Battles are fought in rice paddies and on rain-slicked hills. The earth is churned into a thick, sucking slurry of mud and blood. You struggle for footing, your armored legs, heavy and clumsy. The stench is overpowering the sulfur of gunpowder, the iron-rich smell of blood, the sour tang of sweat and fear, and the unavoidable smell of men losing control of their bowels in their terror. If you fall, your 60 pounds of armor will make you a helpless, floundering target. Getting up is a desperate life-or-death struggle. In this chaos, a particularly gruesome and quirky practice takes place, kubitori, or head-taking. Your pay and prestige are not guaranteed. They are earned with proof of your kills. When you fell an enemy, especially one of high rank, you are expected to saw off his head, with your dagger a trophy to present to your lord after the battle. Warriors carry special bags for this purpose. The battlefield becomes a horrific marketplace where men scramble over fresh corpses to claim a head. It's the most morbid, performance-based bonus system ever devised. Amid this carnage, who is even in charge? Military historians still debate the effectiveness and command structure of these massive mixed armies. Your lord sits on a folding stool on a hill far to the rear, a distant, untouchable figure. Orders are relayed by a chaotic system of signal flags, drum patterns, and messengers on foot, who are often cut down before they reach their destination. The Sashimono flag on your back identifies you as part of a unit, but your unit might get an order to advance just as the one next to it is ordered to retreat. More often than not, you have no idea what the larger plan is. You just push forward into the wall of noise and death. It's like playing an online game with a terrible connection. The lag between the command and the action can be fatal. When the battle finally ends, it is not with a sudden clean silence. The roar of fighting is replaced by a new soundscape, the collective moaning and crying of thousands of wounded and dying men across the field. It is a sound that will drill itself into your memory and echo in your quietest moments. You stand, deafened, exhausted, spattered in things you don't want to identify. You survived this time. But the terror, the random, impersonal nature of the violence, the sheer dumb luck of it all chips away at the warrior spirit you've been told you possess. It's not heroic. It's just awful. And after facing this horror, you are expected to return to society and slot yourself back into a rigid and unforgiving hierarchy that brings its own unique set of pressures. And after facing this horror, you are expected to return to society and slot yourself back into a rigid and unforgiving hierarchy that brings its own unique set of pressures. You wash the blood and mud from your skin, you put away your armor, and you step onto a different kind of battlefield. One with no open fighting, but just as much danger. In the chaos of war, there was a strange, terrifying kind of simplicity. Here in the castle town, under the watchful eyes of your peers and superiors, every action is a calculated risk. You are trapped in an invisible cage of social expectation. You are constantly being watched. Your superiors scrutinize you for any sign of weakness or insubordination. Your equals watch you for any misstep that might give them an advantage. Those below you watch you with a carefully concealed mixture of fear and resentment. Your life is a performance, and the stage is set the moment you are born. You can never leave it. This performance is dictated by a system that became legally codified during the long peace of the Edo period. This is the mainstream historical fact of your social world, the Shinokosho, the four-tier class system. At the very top, that's you, the samurai, the warrior administrator class. Below, you are the farmers, the no, who are considered the foundation of the nation because they produce the rice that feeds everyone. Below them are the artisans, the ko, who make things. And at the very bottom are the merchants, the sho, who are seen as a parasitic class because they don't produce anything tangible, merely profiting from the work of others, even if they are often far wealthier than you. This is not just a social convention, it is a legally enforced reality. You were born a samurai, and you will die a samurai. The idea of social mobility is a dangerous and foolish dream. Within this rigid world, your daily life is governed by a dizzying array of etiquette, a quirky and stressful tidbit of which is the simple act of bowing. It is a science, a language all its own. The depth of your bow, its duration, and where you place your hands are all precisely calibrated to the relative status of the person you are addressing. You see a senior commander in a corridor. Is that a 30-degree bow or a full 45 degrees? You hold it for a count of 3, but do you dare make eye contact as you rise? A bow that is too shallow is an unforgivable sign of arrogance. A bow that is too deep could be interpreted as sarcasm or an admission of some fault. You need a protractor and a pocket sundial just to say hello without risking a fatal misunderstanding. Even within your own samurai class, the hierarchy is a complex and finely graded ladder. You might be a high-ranking Hatamoto, a direct vassal to the shogun himself, or a lowly Gokunin, a houseman whose family has served a minor provincial lord for generations. Your specific rank dictates everything: the type of fabric you're allowed to wear, the design of your home's entrance gate, whether you can ride a horse or must walk, and who you are permitted to marry. You are not just a samurai. You are a man of a specific rank, and you are never ever allowed to forget it. This creates a crushing sense of collective responsibility. Your actions are not your own. A foolish mistake or a moment of cowardice doesn't just stain your name, it brings shame upon your entire family, your ancestors, and your lord. You are not an individual. You are the current representative of your lineage, a single link in a long chain. Your one and only job is to not be the one who breaks. It's like living your entire life with your whole extended family, both living and dead, looking over your shoulder every time you make a decision. No pressure? This leads to a fascinating question that sociologists and historians still debate: the extent to which this rigid structure provided social stability versus how much it stifled innovation and personal potential. On one hand, it created a remarkably stable and orderly society that endured for over 250 years. Everyone knew their place and their function. On the other hand, it was profoundly inefficient and unjust. A brilliant boy born to a merchant family could never hold public office, while a foolish and incompetent boy born to a samurai family was guaranteed a position of authority. It was a system that valued bloodlines over brains and conformity over creativity at every level. And at the very top of your personal pyramid is your lord, your daimyo. He holds absolute power over your life. He is your CEO, your landlord, your judge, and your jury. With a single word, he can increase your stipend, give you a position of great responsibility, or strip you of everything you own. He can reassign you to a desolate northern fortress where the winters are brutal and the food is scarce. And as you know, he can order you to end your own life for the most trivial of reasons. Your primary professional goal is not to shine or to innovate, but to be a predictable, reliable, and utterly unobtrusive part of his administration. Your job security is entirely dependent on the mood of a man whose primary concerns are politics, power, and his own prestige. This suffocating social pressure dictates every public aspect of your existence. You are not a person, you are a position. You are defined not by your character, but by your rank. There is no escape, no pathway for ambition, no room for personal desire. And this brutal lack of freedom is never felt more keenly than in the most intimate part of your life, the world of love and marriage. And this brutal lack of freedom is never felt more keenly than in the most intimate part of your life, the world of love and marriage. The epic poems and tragic plays of your culture are filled with tales of passionate, all-consuming love. But for you, these are pure fantasy. Love is a fire, and you have been taught your entire life that your primary duty is to prevent fires. It is a dangerous, destabilizing force in a world built on order, duty, and predictable transactions. You do not choose your partner. You do not go courting. There is no romance. One day, probably, when you are in your late teens or early 20s, your father will summon you. He will inform you in the same dispassionate tone he uses to discuss the price of rice or a change in military strategy that a marriage has been arranged. This is the unchangeable mainstream historical fact of your romantic life. Your marriage is an omiai, a carefully negotiated contract between two families. The goal is not your happiness. The goal is strategy. Perhaps your family needs to forge an alliance with a more powerful clan. Perhaps your prospective father-in-law holds a key position in the shogunate's administration. Perhaps her family has wealth that can bolster your own family's flagging finances. You are a political asset, a piece on the board. Your future wife is the corresponding piece from the other side. You may be shown a stylized portrait of her. You may, if the families are particularly modern, meet her once in a formal, heavily chaperoned setting where you will exchange a few stiff, pre-rehearsed pleasantries. More likely, you will see her for the first time on your wedding day. Your bride is a product of the same system that created you. She is the daughter of a samurai, and she has been raised to be the perfect samurai wife, disciplined, modest, utterly obedient to her husband and her in-laws, and skilled in managing the complex affairs of a warrior household. Her primary, non-negotiable duty is to produce a male heir to carry on your family name. She is a stranger who now shares your home and your name, and she is just as trapped as you are. Her position, however, is far more precarious than yours. This leads to a quirky and rather chilling tidbit about your marital rights. While you are bound to her, your bond is not unbreakable, at least not from your side. A man can divorce his wife with shocking ease by issuing her a simple 3.5-line letter of dismissal called a mikudari han. There were 7 official grounds for such a divorce: disobedience to her husband's parents, failure to produce children, lewdness, jealousy, suffering from a serious illness, stealing, and even being excessively talkative. Her entire future rests on her ability to silently and efficiently meet your family's expectations. A wife, by contrast, has almost no legal means to divorce a husband, no matter how cruel or neglectful he might be. Her performance review is constant, and the consequences for failure are absolute. Within this rigid framework, historians and literary scholars debate how often genuine affection grew in these arranged unions. It was not impossible. Over years of sharing a life facing challenges and raising children, a quiet form of companionship, deep respect, and even a form of love could certainly blossom. But it would be a fortunate accident, a quiet garden cultivated in private, not the foundation of the relationship. The passionate love stories you hear are popular precisely because they are so far removed from the mundane reality of most people's lives. So what happens if you do find real love? What if you develop a genuine passion for a woman who is not your wife? Perhaps a beautiful servant girl, or most dangerously, the wife of another samurai. This is not a romantic drama waiting to unfold. It is a death sentence. A clandestine affair is a fundamental betrayal of the social order. It is an act of treason against the web of alliances your marriage represents. If you are discovered, the consequences are swift and brutal. Your lover would likely be executed. You would be ordered to commit seppuku to restore the honor you had so selfishly stained. Your moment of personal happiness would bring utter ruin and annihilation upon two families. It's a dating scene where a single misstep leads directly to ruin, which makes you almost nostalgic for the simple agony of a battlefield. The only socially acceptable outlets for desire are transactional. If you are of sufficient rank and wealth, you may be permitted to take on official concubines whose primary role is also strategic to provide more potential heirs. Or you can visit the licensed pleasure quarters, the yukaku. These were walled-off districts, worlds unto themselves, filled with tea houses and broths where men could pay for the illusion of romance. But it was just that an expensive performance, a temporary escape, not a genuine connection. Your heart, then, is the one piece of territory you are never allowed to claim for yourself. It is governed by the same iron fist of duty that controls everything else. Love is a liability. Affection is an indulgence. You are shackled in a political contract, and the emotional hollowness at the center of your life is a constant quiet ache. For many samurai, especially as the centuries of war ground to a halt, this deeply unsatisfying private life was paired with an equally barren public one as you became a warrior with no war left to fight. Your heart is a locked room, and your public life is a stage where you perform the role of a dutiful subordinate. For generations of your ancestors, this hollow existence was at least punctuated by the visceral, terrifying purpose of war. But for you, living under the new, unshakable authority of the Tokugawa shoguns, even that is taken away. And so you become a warrior with no war left to fight. This is the great defining historical fact of your later life, the Great Peace. In 1603, after a century of bloody civil war, the Tokugawa clan finally unifies Japan and establishes a shogunate that will rule for over 250 years. The country is closed off from the outside world, and internal strife is ruthlessly suppressed. The fighting stops. The endless cycle of campaigns, sieges, and skirmishes that has defined the samurai class for centuries grinds to a halt. On the surface, this is the ultimate victory, the goal every warrior has ever fought for. In reality, for you, it is a catastrophe. Your entire existence is oriented around conflict. You were trained from birth to fight, to endure hardship, to kill and to die. Your armor, which you still meticulously maintain, gathers a fine layer of dust in the armory. Your swords, which you still practice with in lonely solo drills, have not tasted battle. The skills that made you an essential and feared member of society are now obsolete. You are a finely honed weapon, a masterpiece of deadly engineering, and you have been sealed inside a display case for good. An existential dread begins to creep in. If a warrior does not fight, what is he? For many, the answer is a bureaucrat. You trade your spear for an abacus and your sword for a writing brush. Your new battlefield is a stuffy, paper-walled office in the castle's administration block. You spend your days managing land surveys, recording rice tax collections, mediating minor disputes between villagers, and endlessly copying official documents. The work is repetitive, tedious, and utterly devoid of the glory you were raised to seek. The adrenaline of a cavalry charge is replaced by the quiet anxiety of smudging a character on an important scroll. You went from a life defined by the mantra, live by the sword, die by the sword, to a new unspoken rule, live by the filing system, and try not to die of boredom. For others, there isn't even that. Many lower-ranking samurai are simply retainers on a list required to live in the castle town and be available if called upon, which they never are. You have nothing but time. Endless, empty days stretch before you. You practice your swordsmanship until your arms ache, but it's a hollow ritual, a dance with a ghost. You try to apply your warrior's discipline to other pursuits, the tea ceremony, no theater, composing poetry. But these feel like elegant ways to distract yourself from your own growing irrelevance. Out of this bubbling cauldron of boredom, frustration, and toxic masculinity, a quirky and dangerous subculture emerges: the kabukimono, or the eccentrics. These are often masterless samurai ronin, or the disaffected younger sons of samurai families with no prospects. They reject the rigid, peaceful order of the new society. They swagger through the streets in loud, garish kimonos, wear their hair in unorthodox styles, and carry ridiculously oversized swords. They invent their own slang pick fights, with townspeople refuse to pay for their drinks, and generally terrorize anyone weaker than them. They are a social menace, a blight on the new peace, but they are also a symptom of a class of men bred for violence with no socially acceptable outlet for it. They are the first punks, and their rebellion is fueled by sake and despair. This entire era is a paradox, and historians debate whether this long peace was the golden age of the samurai or the beginning of their slow decay. On one hand, it was during this period that the abstract code of bushido was truly formalized and romanticized in texts. Martial arts were systematized from battlefield techniques into refined disciplines or do-ways like kendo and judo. The aesthetics of the samurai class, its art and literature, reached a new height of sophistication. But on the other hand, the warrior class had lost its very reason for being. It became a class of parasites living on hereditary stipends, drawn from the labor of a farming class they no longer physically protected. You find yourself in a strange state of mind, a perverse nostalgia for the very horrors you survived. You remember the roar of battle, the stench of blood and mud, the sheer terror of it all. And you find yourself missing it. Because as awful as it was real. It was a world of consequence, a world where your skill and your courage mattered. Your purpose was clear kill or be killed, survive. Now your purpose is to properly stamp a document. The quiet, creeping misery of peacetime feels in some ways worse than the sharp, honest terror of war. With no purpose to fill your days, you and your comrades fall into darker pastimes. The sake flows more freely. Dice games where you gamble away the meager stipend your lord provides become a daily habit. Visits to the pleasure districts become more frequent. You are sinking slowly into a mire of debt, drink, and despair. Your soul, like a sword left too long in its scabbard, begins to rust from the inside out. You are a ghost haunting your own life, a relic of a bygone age. This spiritual bankruptcy is a heavy burden, but it is made infinitely worse by a much more concrete and humiliating problem. Despite your noble title, you are perpetually hopelessly broke. This spiritual bankruptcy is a heavy burden, but it is made infinitely worse by a much more concrete and humiliating problem. Despite your noble title, you are perpetually, hopelessly broke. You stand at the absolute pinnacle of the social hierarchy, a member of the ruling elite. Commoners must bow as you pass. But in the quiet of your own home, you are engaged in a constant, desperate battle against poverty. You have all the prestige in the world, but you can't use it to buy dinner. The source of your financial misery is the very system that defines your status. This is the central historical fact of your economic life. You are not paid in money. You are paid in rice. Your income is a hereditary stipend measured in a unit called the koku, an amount of rice roughly 180 liters, considered enough to feed one person for 1 year. A great lord might have an income of 100,000 koku. You, a respectable but mid to lower ranking samurai, might receive a stipend of 100 koku or less. This sounds substantial, but you live in a castle town, not a rice paddy. You need cash for rent, for lamp oil, for clothing, for repairs to your home, for everything. To get that cash, you must take your rice check to a broker, a merchant who will convert it into coin of the realm. Here is the trap. The merchants and brokers set the exchange rate, and it is never in your favor. Meanwhile, the new peace has unleashed a vibrant commercial economy. The cost of goods from a new kimono to a cooking pot is steadily rising. Your income, however, is fixed. It is the same stipend your grandfather received. You are effectively a man on a fixed pension, living through a period of rampant inflation. Every year your purchasing power shrinks. Every year you get a little poorer. It is a slow, inexorable slide into insolvency, and you must do it all with a smile. The pressure to maintain appearances is crippling. You are a samurai. You cannot be seen in a frayed kimono. The wall around your modest home cannot be allowed to crumble. You must still retain at least 1 or 2 servants, even if you can barely afford to feed them. Your swords must be perfectly maintained, your armor kept free from rust. You are living a lie, projecting an image of dignified stability while frantically juggling debts behind the paper screens of your house. So what can you do? Your code forbids you from engaging in commerce. A samurai does not dirty his hands with trade or labor. That is for the lower classes. But your children are hungry. So in the quiet of your home, you take on humiliating side hustles. This is a quirky and rather pathetic tidbit of your existence. You might spend your evenings assembling cheap paper umbrellas or crafting decorative toothpicks to be sold anonymously through a third party. Some samurai families raised insects like crickets or grasshoppers to be sold as pets in tiny bamboo cages. It is clandestine, shameful work, a desperate scramble for a few extra coins to supplement a stipend that is no longer enough. Inevitably, this is not enough. You have to borrow money. And the only people with money to lend belong to the merchant class, the very people you have been taught to disdain your entire life. You go mortified to a wealthy moneylender. He bows deeply to you in public, but in the privacy of his office, the roles are reversed. He holds all the power. The interest rates are ruinous, and soon you are trapped. You take out new loans just to make the interest payments on the old ones. The man who is socially your inferior has become in practice your master. The irony is a bitter pill to swallow. It's the ultimate indignity taking financial planning advice from a man you are legally permitted to strike down for showing you disrespect. Economists and historians continue to debate the primary cause of this widespread samurai poverty. Was it the inflexible rice-based stipend system that was simply unfit for a modernizing cash-based economy? Was it the samurai's own cultural baggage, a deep-seated disdain for money that left you financially illiterate and unable to manage your own affairs? Or was it the result of predatory lending by the savvy merchant class who saw a vulnerable elite and exploited them for everything they were worth? The truth is a tangled knot of all three. When the side hustles and the loans fail, you are forced to sell your family's heritage. First go the nice scrolls and the lacquered tables. Then, with a heavy heart, you might sell a suit of armor, perhaps the one your great-grandfather wore. Finally, the ultimate shame: you sell a sword. Not the katana, never the soul of your family, but a companion sword, a dagger. You are literally selling pieces of your identity to pay for rice. A more honorable solution is to have your son marry a merchant's daughter. Your family gets a massive infusion of cash from the dowry to settle your debts. The merchant's family gets the prestige of a samurai name. Everyone wins, except for anyone who believed that love, honor, or anything other than cold hard cash mattered. Your life becomes a daily exercise in managing this humiliating contradiction. You are a man of immense social status, with perpetually empty pockets. The respect you are shown in the street feels like a mockery when you know you can't afford to fix your leaking roof. This grinding poverty makes the purposelessness of peacetime feel even more cruel. You are trapped in a system that demands you uphold the honor of the past while giving you no viable means to survive in the present. This profound powerlessness, both economic and existential, makes you acutely vulnerable to the final piece of the puzzle, a legal system that is as absolute and unforgiving as any sword blade. This profound powerlessness, both economic and existential, makes you acutely vulnerable to the final piece of the puzzle, a legal system that is as absolute and unforgiving as any sword blade. The law for you is not a set of principles designed to create justice. It is a weapon, a tool designed for one purpose: to enforce the rigid social hierarchy. And it is a weapon with two edges. One edge you get to wield. The other is pressed permanently against your own throat. Let's start with the power you possess. You are walking down a crowded street in Edo. The merchants and artisans scurry out of your way, bowing their heads. But one man, perhaps a wealthy merchant, distracted by his thoughts, fails to show proper deference. He bumps into you without an apology, or maybe he speaks to you in a tone that lacks the required groveling respect. At this moment, you can invoke the most terrifying right of your class. This is the mainstream historical fact of your legal authority, kiri sute gomen, which translates roughly to permission to cut down and leave. You are legally entitled to draw your sword and kill this commoner on the spot for his insolence. It is the ultimate expression of your status, a constant looming threat that ensures the lower classes never forget their place. But it's not quite the license for casual murder, it sounds like. There are, of course, rules and paperwork. The insult had to be severe and unprovoked. Ideally, you'd have witnesses who could attest to the man's rudeness. After the act, you couldn't just wipe your blade and walk away. You had to immediately report the killing to the nearest government office and file a report explaining your justification. If you failed to do this, or if your justification was found to be weak, you could be charged with murder. It's a license to kill, but one that comes with a mountain of bureaucratic red tape. Given these constraints, legal historians debate how frequently the right of kirisute gomen was actually exercised. Was it a common terror with samurai, striking down clumsy peasants on a whim, or was it more of a nuclear option, a right so serious that it was rarely used, but whose mere existence was enough to maintain the intimidating aura of your entire class? The fear it generated was almost certainly more powerful and pervasive than the act itself. Now let's look at the other edge of that sword. You have this terrifying power over those below you. But against those above you, you are utterly powerless. The same legal system that makes you a demigod to a farmer makes you a fragile pawn to your own lord. The The slightest infraction against a superior is not a social blunder, it is a crime. Do you remember the complex geometry of bowing a bow that is too shallow to a visiting official could be interpreted as a calculated insult to his lord, and by extension to the shogun? A complaint about your meager stipend spoken too loudly in a tavern could be reported as insubordination. The punishment for such crimes is not a fine or a demotion. It is death. There is no trial by a jury of your peers, no defense attorney to argue your case. Your lord, or an official acting on his authority, is the judge. The verdict is swift, and the sentence is often that you are to commit seppuku. The law for you is not about guilt or innocence. It is about preserving the harmony and absolute authority of the hierarchy. And the punishment doesn't stop with you. If you are found guilty of a truly serious crime, plotting against your lord, for instance, your entire family pays the price. Your sons may be executed alongside you. Your property will be confiscated. Your family will be stripped of its samurai status, its name erased from the official records, its members cast out to live as commoners, forever tainted by your crime. It's a system of collective punishment so catastrophic that it guarantees almost total obedience. It's as if getting fired from your job also meant your parents lost their pensions and your children were banned from attending school. Even the most primal of warrior instincts, the quest for revenge, becomes bureaucratized in this era of peace. This quirky legal tidbit is known as katakeuchi, the vendetta. If your father is murdered, it is your sacred duty to avenge him. But you can't just saddle up and ride out after the killer. You must first go to the local authorities and formally apply for a license to conduct a vendetta. Your quest for vengeance must be registered and approved by the state. The government effectively turns your burning passion for revenge into a piece of sanctioned orderly paperwork. You live your entire life on a razor's edge. Below you is a steep cliff where you hold the power of life and death over others. But poised directly above you is a guillotine ready to fall at the first sign of disrespect, the first misplaced word, the first hint of nonconformity. You are a warden in a prison who is simultaneously one of its most vulnerable inmates. This precarious existence, stripped of purpose by peace, stripped of wealth by the economy, and stripped of safety by the law, makes the final chapter of your class's history feel less like a sudden tragedy and more like a slow, logical, and unavoidable conclusion. The modern world is coming, and its new ideas about nations, armies, and law have no room for a man whose only real assets are a sharp sword and an ancient title. You are a warden in a prison who is also one of its most high-risk inmates. The law is a weapon you wield against those below you, and a guillotine perpetually hanging over your own neck. This precarious existence, stripped of purpose, wealth, and now legal security, makes the final act of your class's history feel less like a tragedy and more like an inevitability. The modern world is coming, and its new systems of government and warfare have no room for a man whose only remaining assets are a sharp sword and an ancient title. For 2.5 centuries, your world has been an island, not just geographically, but chronologically. It has been sealed in amber, a society running on ancient feudal rules, while the rest of the world has been churning with industry and invention. Then, one summer day in 1853, the bubble bursts. A fleet of foreign ships appears in Edo Bay. They are unlike anything you have ever seen. They are massive, black-hulled vessels that move without sails, puffing black smoke into the sky, moving defiantly against the wind. These are Commodore Perry's black ships and their steam-powered engines and modern cannons make your nation's coastal defenses look like children's toys. The shock is absolute. The shogun, powerless, is forced to sign treaties that open Japan to foreign trade, ending centuries of isolation overnight. This humiliation shatters the authority of the Tokugawa shogunate. The system that has kept you in a state of peaceful, impoverished boredom for generations is suddenly exposed as weak and incompetent. A new radical energy electrifies the country. It is led by other samurai, young, ambitious, and angry men from powerful outer domains who rally around the cry, Sano Joy. Revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. And this brings us to the great cataclysm, the mainstream historical fact that ends your world, the Meiji Restoration of 1868. The revolutionary forces succeed. The last shogun abdicates, and power is formally restored to the young Emperor Meiji. You might feel a flicker of hope that this will restore the honor of the past. You are mistaken. The leaders of this new Japan have no interest in the past. They want to modernize, to industrialize, to create a nation that can stand on its own 2 feet against the West. To do that, they need to destroy the old feudal system. And you are the old feudal system. Historians continue to debate the motivations of the samurai who led the restoration. Were they true imperial loyalists, driven by a pure desire to restore the emperor to his rightful place? Or were they clever pragmatists who saw the terminal weakness of the shogunate and simply used the emperor as a powerful symbol to enact their own revolutionary agenda? For you, a man caught in the tidal wave, the distinction is academic. The result is the same: your world is being systematically dismantled by your own kind. The new Meiji government begins issuing edicts, and each one is a hammer blow to the foundations of your life. First, they come for your income. The system of hereditary rice stipends is abolished. In its place, you are given a one-time payment of government bonds. The amount is based on your old rank, but rampant inflation quickly renders the bonds nearly worthless. For you, a lower-ranking samurai already mired in debt, this isn't a severance package. It's the final nail in your financial coffin. Your last tenuous connection to your feudal lord is severed. You are on your own. Next, they come for your identity. An edict is passed encouraging all men to adopt Western hairstyles. Your Shan Mage, the top knot you have shaved and oiled and tied with painful precision every day of your adult life, the very symbol of your warrior status, is now declared backward. With a few snips of a scissor, you are forced to erase the most visible sign of your class. Then, they come for your soul. In 1876, the government passes the Hittore Edict. It is now illegal for anyone other than the new state-sanctioned army and police to wear swords in public. Your daisho, the matched pair of long and short swords that you have carried every day, that represent your honor, your privilege, and your very essence, are now to be left at home to become wall decorations. You walk out into the street, and for the first time in your life, your hip is bare. You feel naked, powerless, and indistinguishable from the commoners you once ruled. They took your job, liquidated your pension, and then banned your entire corporate culture. The final insult is the creation of a new national army modeled on the Prussian system and built on universal conscription. The son of a farmer, a boy who a decade ago would have thrown himself to the ground in a deep bow as you passed, is now handed a modern rifle, put in a Western-style uniform, and taught to fight. He is the new defender of Japan. You, with all your years of agonizing training in the way of the sword and spear, are obsolete. This leads to one last tragic spasm of resistance, a quirky and heartbreaking footnote to your era, the Satsuma Rebellion. In 1877, the great hero Saigo Takamori, one of the leaders of the Restoration who became disillusioned with the new regime, leads a final doomed uprising of thousands of furious, dispossessed samurai. They fight with their traditional swords and armor with suicidal bravery, and they are systematically annihilated by the cannon's Gatling guns and rifles of the new conscript army. It turns out that bringing a sword to a gunfight is in fact a catastrophically bad idea. The rebellion is crushed, and with it, the very last ember of the samurai spirit is extinguished. You are now a man without a class, without a function, and without a future. The title samurai is gone, replaced by the bland administrative term shizoku, or former warrior family. You are a living fossil, an artifact of a brutal, glorious, miserable world that has vanished from beneath your feet. All you have left are your memories and your scars, the story of a life of suck that future generations will somehow manage to twist into a romance. You are a ghost haunting your own life, a relic of a brutal, glorious, miserable world that has vanished from beneath your feet. All you have left are your memories and your scars, the story of a life of suck that future generations will somehow manage to twist into a romance. This perhaps is the final and most profound suck of all. You don't even get to own your own story. You live out your final years as an old man in a new Japan. You wear the drab, functional clothing of the Meiji era. Your top knot is gone, your swords are gathering dust, and your hands are soft from a life devoid of both combat and labor. You watch as they build railways and telegraph lines as men in Western suits scurry to offices, and you feel like a visitor from another planet, and you start to see the myth being born. You see it in the lurid woodblock prints for sale in the market depicting heroic warriors in impossible dynamic poses. You hear it in the theaters, where kabuki actors perform grand, overwrought dramas about your time. The stories are exciting, but they aren't true. They leave out all the boring parts, which was most of your life. They leave out the debt, the hunger, and the quiet despair. A few key stories are told again and again until they become the whole truth. This quirky tidbit is the tyranny of the highlight reel. The tale of the 47 Ronin, for example, becomes a national epic, the ultimate parable of loyalty. It's a magnificent story of honor and sacrifice. But it was a dramatic exception. For every samurai who died in a blaze of glorious, vengeful loyalty, there were 10,000 like you, who lived a life of quiet desperation, worrying about a leaking roof or a sick child whose greatest enemy was not a rival clan, but boredom and insolvency. Yet the dramatic story is the one that survives because it's a better story. Then your legend goes international. This is the mainstream historical fact of your legacy. The West falls in love with a version of you that never existed. Fascinated by this newly accessible exotic land, they fixate on the most romantic aspects of your class. They see the silent warrior, the Zen philosopher, the master of the death-defying blade. They don't see the man with the bad teeth from a poor diet, the crushing social anxiety of the hierarchical world, or the terror of being ordered to commit seppuku for a political reason. Your life of suffering is flattened and turned into a beautiful, two-dimensional aesthetic. It's the ultimate, most insulting form of identity theft and the victim is your entire existence. As the 20th century dawns, this romanticized myth is re-imported back into Japan. The government building, a modern nationalist state, finds the idea of bushido, not the messy contradictory code you lived by, but the clean heroic literary version, to be an incredibly useful tool. Your memory is co-opted for propaganda. The selfless loyalty, the willingness to die for your lord without question, is held up as the ideal spirit for the new Japanese soldier. The trap that defined your life is polished into a virtue to inspire a new generation. And so cultural critics and historians still debate how this romanticized image of the samurai has been used and abused over the years. It has inspired timeless works of art and cinema. It has provided a rich cultural touchstone for martial arts, and it has fascinated the world. But it has also served to justify militarism and has painted a simplistic, often misleading picture of a complex history. You sit on the porch of your small government-assigned house, and you hear the children in the street playing at being samurai. They shout the names of famous heroes. They swing their wooden sticks like swords, and a bitter taste rises in your throat. They talk of your honor, and you remember the soul-crushing anxiety of trying to interpret your lord's moods. They talk of your zen-like calm, and you remember the constant low-grade headache from your top knot. They praise the beauty of your armor, and you remember the feeling of sweat and chafing, and the sheer claustrophobia of the face mask. They admire your simple Spartan life, and you remember the gnawing emptiness in your belly, and the humiliation of borrowing money from a merchant. It's like listening to someone praise the wonderful bracing air on a planet where you were slowly suffocating for 70 years. The final irony is that the one lesson that was most brutally beaten into you, the suppression of your feelings, the silent endurance of your lot, is the very thing that prevents you from crying out. You don't protest. You don't write angry letters to the editor. You don't correct the story. You just sit and you watch as the truth of your painful, difficult, and deeply human life dissolves into the beautiful, inhuman lie of legend. You were a man, but they have made you a symbol. And the silence is the last price you are forced to pay. And so the story of your long and trying life comes to a gentle close. The sun is setting on the Meiji world, and on you, the quiet old man with all the ghosts. The sharp edges of your memory begin to soften with time, the bitter ironies fading into a quieter, more distant sense of melancholy. The terror of the battlefield, the sting of poverty, the weight of the code, they all begin to recede, like the tide pulling away from the shore, leaving only the smooth, worn stones of a life that was endured. You can let go of the burden now. The endless struggle for honor and station, the constant performance of a role you did not choose, is finally over. You are no longer a samurai, no longer a bureaucrat, no longer a debtor or a relic. You are just a man at rest. The world of frantic striving has been replaced by the simple feeling of the cool evening air on your skin. The clamor of history fades into a soft, gentle hum, a quiet space where you can finally, after a lifetime of holding your breath, allow yourself to exhale. The story is told, the duty is done, and all that is left is the peace that you were promised arriving at last in the deep and quiet twilight of your long journey.